are here. Being AME, I had to go ahead and establish protocol. So I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge my mother, who came all the way from Washington, D.C., and I am so grateful and glad that she's here. Mommy, thank you. To Sister Phyllis, who is upstairs doing all of the audio visual, thank you so much for all that you do all the time. She made sure this was in the bulletin so folks didn't have a chance not to see it. To Brother Ed, who made sure, because we're actually in the transition right now. We just recently had our pastor change, so that's a major shift for us. And in spite of the changes and transitions, he was a proponent. And so wherever he is today, I want to thank him. And of course, our pastor and his absentia. So originally, we were supposed to do this on the 8th. And on the 8th, we couldn't, it was Men's Month, that's what it was. Oh, and excuse me, Sister Roz, who is our usher for this evening. Thank you so much, Sister Roz. I appreciate you. You are a rock star. You're wonderful. Thanks. But it was Men's Month. And he said, why can't you just do it during y'all's month? Let us have our time. And I thought about it, right? As Black women, we don't get that either. So having our time is so important. So if you look behind you to your left or to your right, if you're facing the direction that I am, you'll see Women's Emphasis Month. So this is a closeout. This is our last week. Yesterday we had Zumba. We went to tea around town. Last weekend? Then 2 weeks before that, we were doing floral designing. We did a lot. And it's been a very busy season, but we're very grateful. And so to be able to have this on our schedule is truly a blessing because we don't have much space for that. And so, of course, I can't go home without acknowledging my husband who is taking pictures for us this evening. So thank you so, so, so much. But good evening, everyone. And again, welcome into this space. We are so honored for you to be here with us. And so as we go through this day, I want us to remember that our womanhood is at the priority of everything that we do, and our Blackness as well. And so we have to find spaces that we can really cultivate that and nurture it, because in this world it is hostile, especially for those of us who are productive and are trying to do things. They're attacking us left and right because they don't want to see us there. So I'm grateful to my sisters that were so willing. Dr. Ayana, thank you. She's my sister in many ways. Thank you. To Jada, thank you so much for being here. To Wanda, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. And our two other panelists will trickle in when they arrive. But we are on time. And so to the girlies that were on time, thank you for your timeliness, and thank you for your grace in the process. But to go ahead and jump in, our first question today that we want to hear from you all is, how do you see a woman's body shifting from pre-birth to perimenopause? What does that look like to you? What does that mean from your lens? And understanding that we are all coming from a different lens as well. And so if you want to, share that as well, feel free. Just whenever you're ready to answer.
I guess I'll start. I'm Jada. I wanted to be a part of this because I am in the midst of perimenopause and just learning so much, not only about myself, but with my clients as well, because I have a lot of clients that are having babies a lot later in life, and they are entering perimenopause at the same time too. So when they're going through postpartum change is when it just starts to get, really, really out of whack, and they're just asking a lot of questions. And I'm just so glad that, we're talking about this more, especially when hormones are so important to pre-birth, especially when you begin your period all the way to the end of the period. But you get to see how it's shifting, how your body's developing, how your body's changing, and specifically when we're working with reproductive health, for breastfeeding, and then of course the womb, as well too. But the hormonal, I think, fluctuation is the biggest change that women have to get used to. I think a lot of times they know something is different, but there's no one to really acknowledge that, yes, this is happening, because our elders didn't really talk about it. And I was kind of talking to another friend, like, maybe their environmental or their environment just probably helped them transition a little bit better, because we do run into things like environmental justice, where we are living social determinants, the food we're eating, the food we're not eating, just all of these things that can affect us, that can heighten, the symptoms and the challenges that we're having. But there definitely needs to be more said about the shift of watching your hormones and how they regulate and going into the different stages of reproductive health. Going into perimenopause, just the beginning, and I don't like to call menopause the end. I think they're all stages of life for women, and from what I hear, a lot of them are excited, no more periods. But there's also an enlightenment to it where they've reached a different level, they've transcended, and they're comfortable with themselves, they're comfortable with their bodies, and they're comfortable with relying information as well too.
And I'll chime in. So it's a span of time. So when you use the word pre-birth, that could be from when you're born, right? Everything, we're born with our ovaries. Hormones are setting the stage from the very beginning. And we oftentimes just think about, puberty. You think about that conversation, and that varies, right? Family dynamics are very different. Again, I'll introduce myself. I'm Dr. Ayanna Herbert. I'm the owner of Path Health, and we focus on hormone placement therapy as well as other lifestyle changes. And in May, I did a pop-up called Mothers and Daughters, and the theme of that was the legacy of wellness. What our mothers didn't tell us, what our daughters will know, is what I did. And it was right around Mother's Day, and I called my aunt, and I said, I'm having this, and my mom has passed, and we'll get into that. I said, can you tell me a little bit like what you remember, with my great-grandmother, your mother, my grandmother, and she said how she would have to hide underneath the table to overhear the conversations, and even those conversations were riddled with secrecy. If someone was pregnant out of wedlock and things like that, that they didn't even know where that baby was going to come out of them, all right, and they're carrying a child. And so when I think about pre-birth and this, this arc, this hormone arc, we have to understand the role that hormones play, and not only in just reproduction and in puberty, but also in protecting our health. It's cognitive health, it's cardiovascular health, it's bone health. There's so many purposes. And so body is not only what we see on the outside, it's what's going on in the inside of us physiologically as well, and the role that's playing. So I think about pre-birth, like I said, going all the way to puberty, worried about getting your boobs and getting all the things, right? Like your body is changing. And then when you're in your 20s and then you're like, birth, okay, now my body's about to change again. You have to accept something else about your body and live in this new, unfamiliar space. And then we get, like she was saying, into perimenopause, which can start in your mid-30s, and that's a whole nother acceptance of body shifting and hormones. And so we just have to understand it's a transition, and perimenopause can start as early as mid-30s into the 40s, and it can last 7 to 10 years in transition, where hormones are up and down. Progesterone goes first, and then chaos with estrogen. The symptoms go with that, and so there are a lot of shifts throughout that. And I'll let another panelist pick up. Anyone else want to jump in?
And would you introduce yourself, Jada? I don't think you did. Would you introduce yourself? And as you share your response to the question, would you please introduce yourself also? Go ahead, Jada. We skipped you, sorry.
I'm Jada with the Milk and Honey Company, certified doula, certified breastfeeding specialist, and infant massage instructor.
Was there anyone else?
And so just to remind us, the question is, how do you see a woman's body shifting from pre-birth to perimenopause? And that's just from your lens, what you've seen in this field.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. Hi, everyone. Forgive my tardiness. My name is Chanel Stryker. I am the co-founder and executive director of the Georgia Community Doula Coalition. I'm also a certified holistic community-based perinatal support professional, so doula, lactation education, and childbirth education. How do I see a woman's body shifting from pre-birth to perimenopause? So perimenopause is new for me. I'll be 35 this year, and I was actually sitting with some elders recently, and they were talking about having a birth experience later on in their adulthood. So I think she was like past 40 when she had her child. And I was like sharing that, I'm recently divorced and may want to have another child, but I'm not sure. And I was like, saying how these different things were happening. She was like, yeah, because you perimenopausal. And I was like, no, I'm not. And she was like, how old are you? And I was like, I'm gonna be 35. And she was like, yeah, you perimenopausal. So it sent me down this like spiral of learning all of these things about menopause and perimenopause, something that I thought was gonna be so far away, but I'm so close to, especially when I'm revisiting my own, you know, reproductive health again and understanding like what my body is doing, because there have been a lot of changes since I've entered into my 30s. Um, so yeah, so it's a journey on that I'm learning. I have had clients who have had children in their 40s, but we didn't discuss menopause or perimenopause because these were women who already had challenges with fertility prior to entering into this stage. And so it was more so conversations about preserving their fertility and how to, you know, navigate the ebbs and flows of both things. And I think that for me, yes, it's a shift from being pre-birth to being in matrescence to being into perimenopause and menopause, but I think it's just the importance of, and that we tend to have, you know, sometimes forget and not even realize the connection with our bodies just in general. So even from when you are, you know, in your prime, you know, your prime childbearing years into once you exit out of that space and you go into the next phase of womanhood, what things do I need? You know, how do I care for this new body? What are the hormonal implications of me, you know, getting older and going from, you know, one phase to the next. So that's my answer for that.
I hear relearning, accepting. Not yet.
Just hold that button.
Not yet. Chanel, give her your mic.
Test. Okay, there we go. Hi, I am Kelly Jackson. Again, I'm so sorry for my tardiness. Allie, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'm so excited to be here. I am Kelly Jackson. I am a workforce development coordinator with Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies, and I'm also a childbirth educator. I feel that this is a great question, starting off. We do not talk about perimenopause enough. I feel like it's, well, even when we discuss periods as well, it's either all about the period or all about the perimenopause, but we don't talk about perimenopause enough. And I don't even think it's because of our age. I'm in my 30s, but my mom always taught me and my siblings growing up, she always talked about menopause. And it's so different now because it was a stigma to talk about menopause in that phase back in the day. And they used to call it over the hill. I don't know if anybody's in here to know. You know what I'm talking about? That's what they used to call it. It's like, oh, she over the hill. She over the hill. Once you get over 40, and now we look at 40. I'm excited for 40. The 40s, the women in their 40s are doing it, okay? But I said that to say I think each stage is so important because you don't really realize how many changes our bodies go through. As women, our bodies go through so many changes. And one of the things my mom always would say, and my mom is not a medical expert, okay? She's just my mom. But it's wisdom, right? She always says you kind of go back to what you came from. So you start off as a child, like this young man here, I don't know him, but if it was a young girl, even the young boys, they're not thinking, their hormones are not popping, they're not, you know, they're just little children. And then once you get older, you know, you're not really thinking about and all that other stuff. You know, there's so many changes, and I think it's so important from the beginning. I don't want to jump the gun because I know the questions include education, but I think it's important to have these conversations like, hey, you're young now, this is what your body is doing now. You're going to get to this stage where this is going to happen, and I just think it's beautiful. So when I see a woman's body changing from her getting her period to going through menopause, I think it's just beautiful and very complicated what we go through, but it's I love it. I love it.
You hear me now? No?
Hello?
Hello? Okay. All right. Yes. Hi, my name is Wanda Lee. I am a certified childbirth doula and a certified breastfeeding specialist. I want to piggyback on what all the ladies said, the wonderful things about ladies, period, women's, period. Their bodies, our bodies are powerful and dynamic. I want to start that first. I'm a 50-year-old woman, okay? And boy, do I have a story. I can tell you guys so much about what I'm going through now. But let me just start from pre-birth. Totally different change, with the weight gain. I'm telling my personal
No, it's
story.
good.
The weight gain and your body just go through so many changes, and so that's why I say we are powerful and dynamic, and all the other fluctuations that come along with that. Now, from pre-birth to menopause, I tell my mom, oh my gosh, now I remember you. That's all I heard, just like you said, her talking about, oh, it's so hot. All these hot flashes. I mean, over and over and over again. And I remember me saying, it can't be that bad, Mom. Just drink some water, you'll be okay. You're going to be all right. I mean, I got tired of hearing it every day. And I saw the different phases of her body. She went through the weight gain, the hair loss, oh boy, the mood swings. I was trying to be away from home every weekend until I went off to college. But now that I'm going through it, I tell you guys, it's a struggle. And I struggle in silence as a doula. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're showing up with, your sisters, your clients, you're showing up in this space, but you got to take care of yourself first. When I tell you, like, it's a struggle, and I suffered in silence with the hot flashes, the mood swings, the weight gain, and it seems like when you talk to some, like when I go to my doctor's appointments and I mention it to my OB, it's like, oh, you'll be okay. It's going to be all right. And I'm like, no, it's not going to be all right. You don't understand. Like the mood swings, all of my children, they researched it. Mom has changed. You know it's bad when your children start Googling stuff. And they was like, we figured it out, Mom, why your patience is short. Why you just change. We figure out. I said, so what is it? You're going through menopause. So I'm still trying to research and learn myself what's the most effective way to deal with this, especially with your energy levels. No matter how much I hit the gym, no matter how many different vitamins I take, vitamin A through Z. I try everything, and I'm just gonna say I'm still gonna hang in there, and we just gotta come together, as birth workers, I think, and just support this through education and community care. But it's a consistent struggle for me. But I'm so resilient, and I said I gotta show up for our clients. I gotta show up. So hey, when y'all find out a solution, let me know.
I just want to piggyback before we go on the next question. It is enough for women to simply just not feel like yourself. That is enough of an explanation when you show up to your physician. You know you. You've lived at least 30 plus years of knowing yourself, and it's enough to say something just isn't right. Just the way she said her children were able to say, "Mom, you're just not you," right? And that often is enough that a trained physician's ears should peak and want to dig deeper into what that actually means for you as an individual, because it will not be the same for every woman. I can name all the symptoms, tell everyone to raise their hand in here if they're in that stage. Every hand may go up, but not for the same reason, because we are all individuals. And like I said, when we talk about change, those changes affect sleep. If you're not sleeping, how does that affect your day? Okay, things like that. If you are having issues, even libido, how's that affecting your marriage? How's that affecting your relationships? Snapping at your kids, all those things all play into that. And so again, you could just say, I just don't feel like myself. Make sure you're with someone and have a team that's listening.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Just to acknowledge, I told y'all I'm AME, so protocol. Our president did walk in. I just want to acknowledge her presence, Madam President Crystal Sidbury. Thank you so much for being here. Yes, so one thing I wrote down is trained physician. I mean, I think that is important, right, of course, and also to know your body, because sometimes I think we can all agree we put trust in the provider, but back to your point, you know your body. I'm hell on earth at the doctor's. I am, because I know my body, so I don't mind making an enemy out of a provider if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. And I think sometimes I saw Michelle Obama's recent podcast, and she said, black women don't complain enough. We don't. We do not. We go into these doctors' office and they make you feel like you're hostile. When really we just need to literally say, thank you for the red flag, let me walk on out and go where I'm welcome, because my money is green just like theirs. And so I think it is important, and I'm gonna jump around to question number 3. But I want to hear from you all about how does race, class, and gender identity care affect us across life stages? Because we know that black women are dying at alarming rates in childbirth and across the spectrum, you name it. And so, when you really think about this, the stages grow, but the consequence appears to be very similar. So, from your perspective, when you think about race, class, and gender identity, how does it affect care across? And Dr. Ayana, since you started first, Kelly, would you start first and we can come this way?
Yeah, of course. I'm a little conflicted with my answer because I was going to say race is, if you're black, you were doomed in the system. But if you look at the data, black rich moms are affected just all the same, right? Your income doesn't matter, so your class really doesn't exclude you. Yeah, being black is putting you at risk, and a lot of times providers dismiss our pain. They dismiss our concerns. Like you said, Michelle Obama said we don't complain enough, so it's very important that you speak up with any concern that you have, and you teach other people to speak up. Again, class is not just because you have money. Oh, you go to the best of the best. I go to I'm going to. People think Northside's the cream of the crop, but we know that's not the best of the best. And then gender identity, we know how the LGBTQ community is affected. It's a lot of discrimination regardless of, your stance on it. They're people as well, and they need care, because that's a life at the end of the day. So, but yeah, that's my answer.
This is such a broad question. It's such a broad question because I think not only is it broad, I think we have a lot of information about what it is to be black in any system, right? Whether that's the healthcare system, the education system, whatever the system is, we know what that looks like. So how does it affect care across life stages? I don't know, I'm a storyteller, so I like to just share personal experiences, but something that's really important for me is to ensure that not just my clients and the people that I support are educated about how to care for themselves or how to ask questions, but I also do it with my children. So like when they go to the doctor, they ask hey, what is this you're using? The doctor has to explain every step of everything that's happening, and I just sit there and I allow them to go through that process, as they're building this relationship with their doctor on their own and getting their questions answered. Especially as little black boys, I have 3 sons, it can be hard for them to be able to speak out about, or ask questions without people feeling intimidated, honestly, especially when they're well-spoken, little black boys, it can be difficult. And so I encourage that for them as men, as black men, as black people, to be able to have that autonomy over themselves. And I think that's the most important thing, because what I have seen is that when you are educated, and not educated from a perspective of on paper education, but when you know the questions to ask and when you have a vested interest in your own health, it does make things a little better for you. And even if, like you were saying, you hell in the doctor's office, right? Like even if you're not getting the service that you deserve, then you know that there's somewhere else that you can go to get that support. And you keep going until you get it,
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, there it is. I was gonna say, I thought I had to get yours again. As far as this question goes, I too like to share personal experiences. I do. That's why I'm in this space, because of the things that happen in my life personally. I'm in this space for that reason, and I want to be that advocate for the next woman and other black women, especially because of the things that happened to me when I was going through certain things, and while having 3 of my children. I went through it 3 times, racially profiled insurance I had. Nobody cared that this is a single woman at the time with kids who's working, and I had Medicaid, right? And so I noticed the different treatment all because of the insurance that I had. And I seen it for years working in the hospital from both sides, even the professionals. And I saw it and I said, I gotta do something. This is not fair because we began to adopt, we accept that. And I accepted it for so many years, you know. The importance was to go and take care of myself, go to my doctor's appointments, all of that. But I felt so bad. You shouldn't feel bad or have your head down going to the hospital because people are going to judge you because of the type of insurance that you have. And I saw it firsthand. Other things I also witnessed when I was having my first, when I had my first child. Um, you know how you go to, I think I was 40 weeks, getting ready to deliver or whatnot, and I thought I wanted to have a tubal ligation done after the first child, signed the papers, went through the process. I was pretty adamant about it. So when I finally went into labor that day, first of all, my doctor didn't show up at all. She had an emergency. I saw somebody, a strange man that I didn't even know his name. He wasn't even a permanent physician at the hospital. So it's like, hey, I'm Dr. So-and-so. I'm going to deliver this baby for you. Do you know how uncomfortable that was? But I'm like, what other options do I have? And so he was like, and I don't feel comfortable with doing your surgery, so we're not going to do that today. I had no idea. Like, I'm like, is this right? I felt like it was wrong, but I didn't have a doula. I didn't have a midwife. I didn't have anybody to advocate for me. And I accepted the fact that that was okay. And until I got into this line of work, it's like, oh my gosh, your son is 30. You went 30 years and you just learned that that's not how childbirth, your experience is supposed to be. I did not educate myself at the time because I worked in the doctor's office for 20 years. They're closed down now. I worked in the hospital, and that was the lifestyle that I accepted. It's okay. I always would just think, you know what, get a better job, get a high-paying job, and get you some better insurance. That's how it's not supposed to be. And so I appreciate being in this space because we advocate for each other. We advocate for our clients, and there's a lot of information out there available. It's available to you. So I encourage everyone, whatever it is, whatever type of appointment it is, if it doesn't feel right, speak up for yourself and find that one person, because now that one person is there to advocate for you. You shouldn't have to suffer in silence. That is not okay. And I accepted that for 30 years.
Thank you so much, Wanda. I appreciate that. Jada, just for the sake of time, because we are on time and we're competing with choir rehearsal. So I'm going to skip around a little. Jada, are you okay with not answering that last question?
Sure.
Okay.
But can I chime in on it?
Absolutely. Yes, by all means.
So I'm going to do a quick chime in. Because as a physician, so I've crossed into the well side of care with my practice now, but I'm a board certified emergency medicine physician. And in my training, I trained at Charles R. Drew University, and we were dedicated to an underserved community. But residency, I was the only one. And I could witness among my colleagues in residency why it mattered that I was in the room with certain patients in terms of their care, to be able to advocate even in an emergency room situation. So I just want to chime in that it does matter, in terms of that. Quick on race with perimenopause is that we do experience it different. We get it earlier, maybe more severe, things along those lines. As Black women, and we cannot normalize our stress, because when we do that, we don't talk about it, and we don't, like she said, we don't bring it to the attention of physicians in order to address it. And so that could be one thing, and we'll probably get into another question about going to why there's a gap in what physicians are able to know in terms of how they can help you. There's a plethora of discrepancies and disparities when it comes to healthcare, and I know it firsthand from being in the room and and choosing to be an advocate even in the emergency room. So if we're able to circle back, we have time, I will, but I definitely have a lot of perspective as a physician working in Atlanta, working in Compton, California for training, Decatur, Lithonia, that's where I spent most of my career. So I know what I see, and I know the difference between sometimes myself as a black female physician versus my colleagues who are well-intended, but that doesn't always translate into the care that we get.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Thank you. Yes. Jada, question number 5. Breastfeeding. What do you see as a common cultural norm, and what do you think is needed for our community? I often hear people say, oh, I'm out of that stage. I'm not there anymore. But I think, and you and I have had this conversation before, that it is not just about being at that stage, but the support that you can reach back or offer to someone else that you're passing. So if you could speak to some of that for us today, please.
I think a common cultural norm is assimilation, trying to assimilate into Western culture. As far as I heavily deal with black breastfeeding, and we come from attachment parenting, co-sleeping, bed sharing, and breastfeeding, and there's a closeness to it, and Western culture just did not develop that way. They are taught to keep their baby away. There's actually research that shows that sleep training came out of the Holocaust because they were trying to teach their babies to obey. Don't give them any attention so that they are emotionless, and they're easily controlled. And basically that kind of passed over into Western culture. So we're seeing all of these, cry it out method. Like, I cannot stand a baby crying. Whether, I don't think they're spoiling, that's food spoils. You put food out and it rots. I think people are having kids and don't realize that babies need you. And they don't know the difference from the world. They've been in a hotel for 9-10 months, comfy, cozy, food at, is beckoning call, and then a lot of times they are evicted through interventions when they are not ready to pass over Earthside. And then they're brought into these bright lights, and they're shuffled off into these warming tables and nurseries, and where they need to be right here between the breasts where the heart is. And, I tell my firstborn all the time, you're the first one that really know me. You heard my heart, before anybody else. You heard my thoughts. You heard, just my wishes for you, anything that I ever said. And I said sometimes it carried over into him. I first was, don't be fearless, don't be fearless. And he's very fearless. And this one is Mr. Safety, because I didn't get to say those things. But I have to tell my parents that stay off social media. The U.S. way may not be the way for black families because we come from a communal type of background where we had a village of sisters and aunts, cousins. There were other women that participated in our childbearing lives. My husband has a huge family. And I remember the first day I met his family, there was about 40 people that I met, and I said, stop. I said, I can't meet another person. And even now to this day, when I go, it's overwhelming, and it makes me cry how close they are. And I would be like, whose child is that? And they'd say, oh, that's all of our kids, because they had a compound, and all of them lived on, he grew up on a farm, and eventually they turned the farm into a compound. But those kids, one house, this house, that house. And I had to remind him, I'm here with you by myself. So you cannot leave me here all day with these children, breastfeeding. So my first journey, 6 weeks, had a C-section. They just brought in a pump. She acted like she was scared to touch me. Sent me home with a pump, no education, had a massive oversupply, mastitis twice. So it's like, forget this, I'm not doing this. And by the grace of God, I always say I'm in this because of my sister. We thought she was the crazy one in the family because she home birthed, breastfed, bed shared, baby wore. Like, she was down for the cause. And she would always tell me, what are you doing? That's not a white baby. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is what everybody's doing. They have the latest strollers. They have the cribs. She's like, and you're struggling. And unfortunately, she passed after my son was born 3 months. And I said, I'm just going to try it and see. And it worked. I went on to breastfeed this little boy right here for 13 months. Um, and I loved it. I loved every single moment of it. I loved waking up. I loved the fact that he needed me. And when I decided to not follow the norm, because I was brought up that mainstream isn't always the best option. If everybody's doing it, you may need to go to the other side because convenience is killing us. Access to having everything right when we want it, when I really truly believe that pregnancy is meant to slow you down because you are changing, you're transcending, you're becoming aware of things. You don't look at the world the same. My boundaries, I set those a lot better because, again, I have kids. I had to rotate my world around their schedule, and it made life a lot easier. But I think, that's one of the common cultural norms is trying to assimilate into a world that is not designed for us, for one. And they keep telling us that every day, that they don't want us here. They don't want us to thrive as a culture. And I think when we accept that and we kind of come back home, to what we know, and we get back into community, so that means listening to our elders, even though we may not want to hear everything. Um, Going back to, just with Wanda, going back to touching the ground, touching the earth, and getting involved. Maybe even possibly, raising your kids. I know for this one, I told my husband 5 years, I want to be the one to teach him, to feed him, to, just be the big support for my kids. And it worked, you know. For me, it worked. That was something that I always knew that I wanted to do. And of course, every person can't do that because some moms have to go to work. But there are some structural changes that we have to change. Of course, maternity leave, different policies, legislation. But sacrifice, sometimes does work. One door closes, others open. We've had some times where we may have gone without, the next party, the next vacation, but it always worked out because in the long run, that was what mattered in my family. So I always try to just instill in my parents, do what's best for you. Stay off social media. Stop comparing yourself to other families because all of it's a lie. They're not telling the truth. They may be filling that refrigerator with all those milk bags, but they're not telling you about the clogged ducts, the mastitis they're going through, the hormonal changes. Because if you're overworking your thyroid, what other problems are those causing that they don't even know about that they're having? So figure out your family and what you want to do and how you want to provide it. And I really think it just comes back to community, and we need to change the healthcare system back to an oxytocin-based way of what way can we provide oxytocin? Because if you know me, I always say oxytocin gets you pregnant, gets you unpregnant, it feeds the baby, and it also helps you in postpartum, and it also helps you in life because you need hugs. And we don't hug enough. And I think the pandemic has really struck, really made everyone kind of, and I was a hugger, and I've always been known as a good hugger, but people are so, don't touch me, that's disrespecting my space, and not knowing that we really need to get back to leaning into each other, talking to each other, having these conversations. But yeah, the biggest thing I think is assimilation, trying to be like a culture that it's just not us. It's not us.
Thank you so much, Shada. I appreciate that. Dr. Ayana, I know you probably have some more things to say, but for the sake of time, can you share a little about what it looks like to really care for someone who is going through perimenopause and menopause? For those who are in the village, those of us who are surrounding them, how do we support, right? We often hear you talk about how to support families, but we don't hear how to talk about women who are going through. And as I understand it, according to Milken, it's a $2+ billion industry that is truly almost untapped in terms of research and development at the magnitude at which it could be. So if you wouldn't mind sharing about how can we help?
So that's one thing we think about where women are naturally supported, definitely pregnancy, we got gender reveals, or all the kind of things. And then that support kind of drops off for women in their 40s and 50s in that realm. And so that is one thing that I think that women in their midlife need more support and more celebration. The next thing is, you always talk about community, is just to always know that you're not alone, to open up these conversations within healthcare. Education is another big one in terms of filling these gaps. And so the way, Village with health coaches, things like this, and panels, I think are really important, for us in perimenopause. As far as the care, now, one thing I always want to touch upon is we can look at the healthcare system, we can see its brokenness, but there's also a place where we cannot necessarily put heavy blame. When I was training, I was in my second year of residency in 2002 when this huge study came out called the WHI, or Women's Health Initiative, that just shut down hormones as a modality for treatment. And so I didn't get trained, your doctors didn't get trained, okay? So that is one big reason why that ear doesn't peak when we have all these symptoms, and why education is so important, and why we need to fill that gap when it comes to perimenopause. So you have to be able to seek out someone who is very intentionally educate themselves. Like I say, I'm a board certified emergency room physician, so you could say, well, why are you doing hormone replacement therapy? Because I see the consequences of it, okay? Every day in my career, whether it's diabetes, cardiovascular disease, dementia, broken bones, so all the symptoms that can translate into long-term health crises can be prevented by things that we can do when we're taking care of our metabolic health, which hormones affect. And so how do you look at that? You have to understand it is a comprehensive evaluation. It's not one size fits all is another thing too. Someone has to understand the difference between perimenopause and menopause. Those are two different things and requires two different treatments. Again, I said we're all individuals. Even though as a collective, we need to know that we're not alone. Like she said, we're not suffering in silence anymore when we put that out there. But understand what a comprehensive look at your symptoms, because like she just brought up thyroid, right? So fatigue, all the things, it all plays into each other. So you have to have a physician or a team. Like I already said, it starts with listening. You sit, the first thing I learned about doctoring is listen to your patient. They're gonna tell you exactly what they need and exactly what you need to do. You just need to listen. And then you have the tools at your hand to provide for them. And so just understand that, like again, it's no cookie cutter solution when we talk about health, when we talk about perimenopause. I think it's understanding how early it can happen. So education, when your body is changing, to know that you have resources, to continue to get educated, read the books, and just get rid of the misinformation. That's a big one for me, and I'm going to touch on that very quickly. My mother passed of breast cancer, stage 4 breast cancer. At that time, when the WHI's conclusion was hormones cause cancer, boom, that was it. So even though I suffered through fibroids, don't touch me with any hormones. Even though I'm 48 years old, perimenopause myself, until I was very intentional about learning it, now I'm in the position to say that is not true. So when you have a family member who may have cancer, that is not a contraindication, for example. So it's just a lot of misinformation, a lot of myths that need to be debunked. And we have a way to go, because we have to get to the point that we're speaking to each other, because they're not talking to us, okay? And you have to understand that. It might not be a lot of differences. We're all women in the end, but people suffer different. We normalize things different, and therefore it has to be handled differently. We talk about, our families, and again, the last thing I'll say, when we're in our midlife, we're in the middle. We have kids. I don't. But, we have children, and we have aging parents on both sides of it while we're dealing with our own stuff and our fluctuating hormones and things like that. So we have to be supported, and I'll just say that as a key.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. So I'm going to close out here. But before we do that, I'm sure you all have questions. We're going to transition downstairs, and you'll be able to ask your personal questions there. If you have one or two for the group, by all means, we'll definitely create this space. But before we close today, first off, thank you, ladies. Thank you for your time. This is 6 o'clock on a Wednesday. It's hump day. So thank you for your time. And the beauty of what is church, this is our Bible study day. And look, we are here having Bible study. And the first scripture that comes to mind is Jeremiah 29. For I know the plans that I have for you to prosper and not to harm you. And so as we are hearing this information, I hope we hear it as armor, so that we can prosper by knowing what we have the ability and capabilities to do. We have connections to black women who are able to help support us through this and direct us in the right path. So please remember that. But before we go, and I say it again? Yes, you can. Sure. It's my mom.
I just want to thank all of you ladies for being here because it's extremely important that this message gets out. This really needs to be on the road. You need to do this again with more people and more women because this information is so important for our people. I'm 68 years old. And I'm where you're talking about, been there, done that. And even in terms of having hysterectomies and how that impacts the hormonal imbalance of women or balance, however else. But this is extremely important, and I want to thank you all for taking the time out. I want to thank my daughter for putting this together. And this is just wonderful. You need to do it amongst more people. Yeah.
Thank you so much. If anyone has a question, just kind of raise your hand. Before we get to your questions, if we could just close out, if we could dream, right? We don't get to do that often. It's kind of, we leave it to kids. But in this space, we have hope. And so it looks dark, but we have hope. So in a dream world, if you could dream just for a moment, in a few sentences, what would you offer to us as a community if you could dream? If you could dream. No limitations. None at all. No limitations. If you could dream.
If I could dream, I would want every woman to have education. Well, every girl. Let's start there. All of our children, even boys, all the children need to be equipped with education about their bodies. Every working woman should have paid leave, right?
Preach.
Paid leave. That we can go through that, but we're not going to go down that road. A free doula. There should be support there, right? There should be, a mom shouldn't have to figure out. It should just be a standard transportation. If she needs, groceries. We're in a culture now where, you see it on TV. We're not trying to give giveaways, and we're not trying to, just give all these things out. But some people need it. And if the mom doesn't have what she needs, then she's not being set up to be able to provide for her baby, or her baby be healthy because she doesn't have the things she needs. So I would want that, and somebody else can share. I don't want to take up the time. But yeah.
Yeah, everything Kelly said, for people's basic human rights to be met, right? I think because we don't see the human rights framework on paper every day, we don't know what we are supposed to have access to just for being alive, right? So you don't have to go to work, you don't have to do anything, but you should have access to food, water, shelter, clothing, every single one of us. And so, looking around and seeing so many people without having those basic necessities, that is something in my dream that I would want, is for all of us to have access to those basic human rights. And then beyond that, like Kelly is saying, just those things that are, that we all may even take for granted, just being able to go get in your car, being able to have your kids attend summer programs and, all of the things, just having access to quality of life beyond that, right? I think the quality of our lives is our responsibilities, but the basic human rights that we are, supposed to have should be afforded to us. And then, like Kelly said, everyone having access to a doula, every Georgia family having a doula, everyone having the support they need pre-conception to conception to postpartum and beyond, even as you're raising your children, raising your families, just having access to the resources that you need.
Hear me?
Love it.
Taking back our autonomy, and really being interested in your bodies. For men and women, I mean, men need doulas too, because I have to be a doula to my husband when he goes to the VA, to the hospital, like, you didn't ask this? But again, it's really talking about our bodies, you know, and what we're going through, but just making sure. And, you know, in a dream world, you know, really in order to have those social determinants of health for quality of life, we're voting too, because none of this matters if we don't put the people in place to help pass these legislations and things so that people see that it really does help for us to vote, get out and vote, and have the people, so we don't have an administration like we have now that are waging a war on women and our bodies. So that would be, you know, my dream world.
And I'll conclude, in my dream world, that I never have to meet you in my emergency room. That is in my dream world. And as we look at perimenopause, that we proceed with knowledge and not fear, with power and no shame, and that we develop among physician colleagues a cultural competence to manage anyone, no matter their race, no matter their gender, no matter their age, and that we can provide the care, the support, like I said, from all the way from a very early age. So that would be my dream world.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you for dreaming with us. And so as we depart from this space and go downstairs, our hope is that you will take all of these hopes and allow yourself to truly receive them within your body, to get the support that you need when you need the support, to be okay with asking for additional help if you don't have what you need, to be okay with asking for help at all, and to know that you do have a community of support around you. Even if it's just one of us to say, hey, something's going wrong. What's that lady's name? And we can get you to the right person. We are each other's community. We are truly all we've got, which is why we are up here. So at the end of the day, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to ask you all to, just as we prepare to go from this place, if we could please take a collective breath, because it was a little deep, it was a little heavy, and it's still beautiful. So if we could breathe in through our nose and out through your mouth, and do that just one more time, in through your nose and out through your mouth. Thank you so much. Please come downstairs, have some refreshments, get a raffle prize, talk to some of our panelists. You can sign up. I believe they're all prepared for that today. So if there's something that you need, if you have a personal question, as I said, we're going downstairs. So thank you so much for being here with us today, and come join us downstairs.